Well, greetings, investors, and welcome to the summer solstice edition of Bull Sessions. I'm going to celebrate a little bit of daylight here, and it fits very well with our electricity theme, our electrifying future. We're going to kind of wrap up. We'll probably do a little bit more wrap up next week as we finalize the final tracking portfolio. Ken and I are probably going to debate all the way to Traverse City and back on who should be in there and not, but that'll just be good, clean fun. So welcome. My name is Mark Robertson. I'm founder and managing partner of Manifest Investing, a co-sponsor of this event and the roundtables. We'll let Ken talk about roundtables in a minute. And I'm joined here actually in person with my dear colleague, Ken Kabula. Say hello, Ken.
Hello, everybody. Glad to be with you from the Kabula dining room. Okay.
It's actually very high tech. I'm impressed. Definitely in the realm of education. And you see, we've got a pretty good crowd there around Stonehenge and stuff to really kick around. So we are going to wrap up this electrifying future discussion a little bit with a discovery that we made here in the last couple of days. And we will walk through at least some of the demonstration portfolios next week during bull sessions. Let's go ahead and get some of the other stuff out of the way. And Ken.
Oh, you found a picture of some salad. All right.
An attendee actually sent me a Portillo's salad because that was a blank spot last week. And again, that's just our reminder that Portillo's is not sponsoring this broadcast, but they should be. All right, here's our legal paperwork to get out of the way. No investment recommendation is intended. This is all about illustration and demonstration of philosophies, methods, and techniques of the modern investment club movement as interpreted by us and by the many throngs of people with the National Association of Investors, also known as Better Investing, and just the fun that we have sharing ideas and walking through them with this community. Please do your own homework before making any decision. We'll try to remind you if we actually hold a stock that is mentioned in our portfolios. I'll head one off at the pass. I do own ABB in a personal portfolio. So that one's going to come up big time. And then I added one little disclaimer there. We actually assume that you're smart enough to form your own opinions and make your own decisions about investing related resources. I actually added that as a disclaimer at the recent national convention and actually got pretty good comments about that. Yes, it is up to you. The roundtable is a week from today. And if you'd like to have a reminder for that, that particular event is a webcast, a monthly webcast that we've been doing since 2010. And the last time I checked, the rate of return had returned to 16%. So 16% since 2010 is a pretty good elixir. So if you'd like to be added to that reminder list for that event, the monthly webcast, send an email to nkabula1@comcast.net. And then if you've got anything else for the two of us, please respond to those two email addresses at the bottom. Anything else we need to cover there, sir?
I don't know what's going on, Mark, but Natalie has been getting 2 or 3 requests a day now for the last couple of weeks. Something is in the water. We had 6 visitors to our Baker Club. We usually have 1, maybe 2 visitors to a club meeting. We had 8 visitors to our club meeting last night, the Bridgeport Club, and we usually have only 1 or 2 visitors. So something's happening, and a lot of these visitors are of an age that they could easily be my children rather than my colleagues.
Oh, excellent.
So I like to see the 40 and 50 somethings coming to the events. It's nice.
That is good. So we've been trying to get a variety of messages out, and again, the one message I would have for anybody out there wondering about this stuff, I personally have witnessed what Ken's 19 clubs have done. He's actually down to 4 now. But when you're talking about, is it 3 out of 4 now clubs that are beating the market?
3 out of 4 are beating the market.
So 3 out of 4, that's still outstanding, and some of them by a fairly decent margin. So it begins to be to the doom casters and naysayers. It begins to be annoying and irritating because a lot of people don't think that you can actually pick stocks and do well. We believe that's the case. So here's our reminder. Notice, Ken, that the blue line has been touched.
I was just going to comment on that. That bar is different than it was last week, and that's a good thing. We're back up to that steady, reasonable growth that we expect from the stock market. That can be measured on this graph at what, about 11% on this graph, Mark?
Right now, the return forecast is, you mean the growth curve?
The growth curve.
Yeah, right at 10 to 11%.
Yeah, great.
And the return forecast, the last red dot on the right, is at 13.3. So we'll see here in the next 2 weeks, just this week, in fact, whether or not we stick on that. I did notice we only stayed in a place 3 straight quarters. You can see them on the chart there. They're all right around in here just a few times in the last 25 years.
I like to remind people, just last evening at our investment club meeting, I had one of our newer people ask me why we looked for straight lines on an SSG and why this curved line was a good representation of reasonable, steady growth. And it has to do with the fact that this is Cartesian coordinates, that's regularly spaced intervals, and the other graph is on polar coordinates, that's not regularly spaced intervals, and that's as far as we need to go. It's just different graph paper, folks. One of them graphs in a straight line when you have consistent growth. One of them graphs in a parabola when you have consistent growth. And they're the exact same thing.
And again, the thing that, I mean, to me, it's as simple as those green bars zig and zag, but they basically track that blue line over time. So anytime we're below the blue line, there should be better shopping opportunities. Above, like we were back here, was an indication that things were significantly overheated there for a while, overstimulated. All right, a couple quick pictures. I just love this one. Sean Mace sent me the one on the left. It's courtesy of Bloomberg, but it's something we have talked about here before, but it's worth repeating. I look at that chart and I try to figure out why we spend so much time talking about risk and why the financial services industry spends so much time worrying about the stuff that's down here. You know, those little blips of, they're nasty when they happen. There's no doubt about it. But the green overpowers the little orange or red areas so significantly that I just wonder why we spend so much time obsessing over all of this market timing stuff and risk avoidance things. And they're always inventing alphas and betas and gammas and stuff. It's kind of frustrating when you think about it. And we counterbalance that with what has become one of Ken, that's one of your favorite charts.
It's absolutely one of my favorite slides that you've ever put together, Mark. It's a wonderful, wonderful slide, which just shows you that one home run can counterbalance an awful lot of bad.
Yeah, and in fact, we could celebrate because I believe Microsoft has hit an all-time high in the last couple of days. It's now up to 88,000 for those 5 positions. So we've now the gains from Microsoft alone are at 83,000 in that round table tracking portfolio. So that picture has even gotten better since the last time we updated it.
And we'll explain this in more detail at the roundtable in a week. We'd love for all of you to be at the roundtable a week from today, I guess it is. Right? Starts at 8 o'clock Eastern time. And again, if you have never been, please join us. And if you've been before, come on back, okay?
All right. So trekking forward, I'll let you handle the honors here with the groundhog. Have you moved ahead of me now?
I have.
No,
I have not moved ahead of you. I moved ahead of Bob Shaw and Kim Butcher, 2 people that I watch. We're number 33, 34, and 35 right now. I do notice you've cooled off a little bit. Is that Ardelyx cooling you off or something else?
Yeah, we blame the hedge funds for Ardelyx and the stuff that's going on there, but it has been floating between $3.50 and $4. I haven't even had the courage to look today, but that's hurts a little bit.
I'm noticing that Matt is developing some real competition between the Lone Star Club and Ginger Williams. They both moved to 1.2 million now, and they're within 20,000 of his portfolio, and in $1 million portfolio, you can move 20,000 pretty quickly a lot of days. So Matt, hold on for the ride. We have a number of months to go yet and a lot of competition. Can somebody in our audience tell us what part of Texas is represented by the Lone Star Investment Club? We're not quite sure where in Texas that one happens.
We don't have anybody. I'll have to look it up and we'll have to make them famous, especially if they take over the lead.
All right.
But yeah, good stuff there. A lot of perennial leaders that are very close to the top, defending champions and the like are involved here. So good stuff. The one thing I would point out is if you go back 1 year and look at this chart in the bull session a year ago, the average stock on this page was at about, the average portfolio was at about 850. So I mean that's a nice difference that a year has made. The monkey has dropped all the way down to 160th.
Yeah, the monkey was stubbornly in the top 20 last year, constantly.
So things are coming back in the right direction. We continue to point out that the value line arithmetic average, that all of the above index is dramatically underperforming. The only way that happens is if the small and medium companies are in a trough, the toilet even, and that's a nice place to go shopping right now.
Well, it's really indicative of the narrow confines that a lot of the winners are. You know, they talk about 11 stocks pulling the stock market higher right now. I'm not sure it's only 11, but it is a much more narrow market than I've ever seen in the last maybe 10, 15 years. How about you, Mark?
Yeah, same here. Again, the ones pulling a lot of weight up at the top are significant, including our friend Microsoft. All right. Well, here are the companies that are not pulling their weight right now, although there is a little more green, and we have pulled up closer to the Russell 2000. A lot of familiar people here, but just in case you're not familiar, Ken and I select a dozen or so smaller companies, faster growing companies around Halloween every year, and we were, what was it, 7 straight years we beat the market?
7 or 8.
And we got humbled last Halloween. But this is the current list that we watch from Halloween to Halloween. And just for comparison purposes, that traditional portfolio, that bar on the left, we're basically at about a 5% gain since we picked them on Halloween. The Russell 2000 is just simply there for reference purposes, just to show us how tough the sledding has been. And we do trail the market by a few percentage points. That can change dramatically, really quickly. If you would all go out and frequent Portillo's, you could help.
Either that or buy a boat. One of the two.
Buy a boat would be good. And move your savings accounts to Service First Bank. All right. So let's go ahead and get with our theme here today. We want to spend 20, 25 minutes, probably max, before we head northwest. And again, this is a theme we've been talking about, this notion of infrastructure, the electricity infrastructure and the amount of electricity that's going to be involved with all the stuff that's being kicked around. Ken, I did replace the rusty GE with a clean image there on the lower left.
Nice, shiny, brand new logo.
Yeah.
Brand new old logo.
We have great expectations. We talked about, what was that, about 2 months ago?
Yes.
The spinoff of GE Healthcare. If you actually go back, if you are still a stubborn shareholder, Ken and I are both holding up our hands, stubborn shareholders of GE, we benefited greatly from the spinoff. The addition of GE regular stock plus GE Healthcare is actually working out to be a pretty good deal so far this year. We pointed out last week that General Electric's stock price is the 6th best performing stock in the stock market this year. So I think some of it has to do a little bit with, GE's positioning in all that stuff on the upper right, from turbines to power production units. Again, I have a little bit of GE background myself, along with some ABB background, so I know a little bit about this kind of stuff, but just a pretty good showing so far, so that's why we basically improved them a little bit.
We can always count on our audience, Mark, to tell us an answer if we need an answer, and everybody's telling us that the North Texas Lone Star Club is out of the Dallas area, North Texas chapter. So
Okay.
we're glad to that. We have a lot of friends in the Dallas area, and that club is really performing quite well in the contest at the moment.
Well, if they edge ahead of Matt, we'll have to get a picture of them, and at that point it becomes Dallas versus Houston, I believe.
Exactly. Yeah.
Good stuff. All right. Here's just a quick reference, kind of nailing down this theme that we've been looking at for the last couple of weeks. The needs in the electricity infrastructure are huge. This particular individual runs a hedge fund, but he was actually featured in that movie, The Big Short, and it was the Mark Baum character. It's kind of an annoying guy, but he was one of the people that was featured for understanding that the real estate mortgage market was going to fall apart back in 2008, and that's what this is about. And he was just recently featured. I think this is from Barron's. I'm surprised that I don't have the reference on here. This might have been in Barron's, could have been the Wall Street Journal, but he's just basically talking about the stuff that we've been talking about, finding these companies that will benefit from the ramp up in the infrastructure, electricity infrastructure. So some pretty good stuff there. And a company here called Quanta that we should probably take a last minute look at, see how that one looks. I believe the ticker symbol of that is PWR, so we should probably see how that stacks up. Okay. So here's how it kind of lays out the image of what we're thinking about here. Where are these opportunities going to be? And again, this goes back to my early days in the mutual club. We had a pretty sizable stake in Corning. And I sat and listened to the stories about how in the early 1960s, you had all these companies battling it out for the championship of providing television sets to consumers. I can remember, now this dates me a little bit, I bet you can even top me here, Ken. I can remember a black and white TV that didn't have a remote, that only had 3 channels on it back in the late 1960s. So you could probably even top that.
That was my whole life up to me got married, Mark.
So anyhow, the guys at the mutual club pointed out that they were looking at all these companies going head to head and basically killing each other, yet Corning was selling to all of them. So they're basically winning and gaining on the strength of the television market. It didn't matter who won, they were going to be the ones providing components. So much like Matt did recently with the name of the company escapes me now, the manufacturer, the
Borg
Warner, where he basically was hedging his bet because they're going internal combustion and electric vehicle, and they're ready for either one. So that's a pretty good deal. So in this case, we're just looking for, who's going to win no matter who wins, and trying to delve that into those areas.
Mark, that ticker for Quanta is PWR, power.
Okay.
And we're also getting a comment from Len. He wants to know why he doesn't see heat pumps on your list, but he thinks that's something that we might want to take a look at as well.
Yeah, and in fact, I would say that's probably a great area to go even for next week, because it definitely leverages in and helps kind of wrap up the conversation. So yeah, heat pumps is a big deal. Tesla has actually talked, Elon Musk has talked quite a bit about heat pumps fairly recently. But just notice the number of times that the word grid appears, in here, and all of the systems type stuff and grids. Okay. And here's one that Ken wanted to share, just basically pointing out that this stuff is wide ranging. And when it comes down to Tesla, in fact, another page from my past, I did a number of projects with Black & Veatch. That's an engineering and construction firm. I am 99% sure that they are not publicly traded, but they are the ones actually doing the project management and distribution of these systems. But the article that Ken has pointed out here, and the link is down at the bottom, actually shares companies like Modine and a few others in the body of the text. So you can check that out. What else did you have?
Yeah, you're correct, Mark, that Black & Veatch is not publicly traded, but I'm not getting any information on it other than the fact that it's not in the databases. So
Right, and they're a great engineering firm. They tried to hire me, by the way, years ago. But they are a great engineering firm, and they are working directly with Tesla on rolling out these type of stations.
I find it interesting, Mark, that companies like Apple and Tesla tend to want to keep their suppliers under wraps. They
Yes.
don't want to divulge how much of the supply of anything is coming from any one supplier. And a lot of times, the less you know about their suppliers, the happier they seem to be.
All right, so that's just an example. So here's where we kind of were last week with a few more companies thrown in. These are ranked, I believe, by manifest rank. So the combination of the return forecast and the quality rating, charge point gets knocked to the bottom because that's a pretty speculative situation down at the bottom there. But again, from top to bottom, you're looking at some companies with some decent growth rates. But you know, we talk about Littelfuse. That's a company that Size presented at the roundtable a month or so ago. They're in everything. You know, all the stuff on that previous page. There's Littelfuse stuff and all that stuff, and in the cars and that kind of thing. So that's the kind of company we're looking for. And some of Ken's recent favorites have bubbled to the top of this list also.
Mark, one that we haven't talked about very much that seems to be appearing in so much of what the folks in my Wolves Club are reading about is Siemens. You don't normally think of that as high tech. You think of that as more heavy industrial.
Heavy industrial.
But Siemens is doing an awful lot of work in this electrification of different things. I don't think that's, I'm showing my ignorance. I think this is a European-based company, Siemens.
Siemens is out of Germany, yeah, I believe, yeah. And you could consider them the General Electric of Europe without stretching too far. Generally, when it comes to Siemens and ABB and GE, you're talking about the major players in transmission and distribution. So they make the major pieces of hardware, industrial hardware, and then of course other companies fill in some of the smaller pieces, much like Littelfuse. So you can see ABB's on this list here. The other one that came up for me on this list that we're about to look at is Hydro One. I didn't realize that's actually Ontario Hydro, and it's basically almost all hydropower. And they sell an awful lot to the northeastern United States. It'd just be interesting to take a look at that one. But again, in the discussion of the total picture, I mean, how do you ignore that massive? Plus, I could put a picture of me at Niagara Falls in here.
I was going to say the crown jewel of Hydro One is the Niagara power plant.
It is.
And all the power being generated on both sides of the falls, from the Canadian side and the American side. So they're very interesting place to visit if you've never visited the power plant. Doesn't take very long to get away from the scenery and go take a look at these huge turbines that are just turning with water.
Yeah, and speaking in terms of the energy future, that's a big solution to clean and renewable stuff. So, and it's been there for a long time, certainly not a new technology. And okay, so that kind of covers some of the ones that were in our first or second cut. And then I stumbled onto this one this past week, trying to, again, looking in the realm of where we find ideas. And I went back and I looked at some of the stuff we had done a year ago. We actually, a year and a week ago, we're talking about very similar topics. And I discovered this exchange traded fund, an ETF. It actually goes by the symbol GRID, G-R-I-D. And it's out of First Trust in Chicago. And they've actually got some pretty neat performing funds that are built like this. And notice that it's got a fairly decent longer term track record. But more importantly, since we were actually talking about this a year ago, check out these numbers over the last year. Anybody who was listening to us a year ago and it ended up in this one or a similar fund has had a pretty good run against a pretty tough market. So again, you can read the description there on the right. That's what we're doing here. We're talking about, you know, clean energy, mostly related to electricity, but it can be, you know, other things too. So pretty good performance there. Here's a look at the actual guts of the top 25 holdings of the fund. One of the things that, again, ABB is number one here, and it's been in the portfolio for over 10 years. We'll look at that in a second. But Eaton Johnson Controls, this happens to be Schneider, which is a French company that's probably comparable to Black & Veatch in some respects. But as you go down that list, there's some fairly interesting things that pop. These guys were actually tracking companies like Cisco, Oracle, Texas Instruments, notice Qualcomm, and NVIDIA. And a lot of these have been in the portfolio for a long time.
Well, that's Siemens at the bottom down there too that we just talked about.
Yep, Siemens is there.
Yeah, Mark, what are the ones with the lack of information? The fifth one down, for example, NGGTF. Is there a reason for that on the list, or what is that?
Okay, the fifth one down, that's actually the grid company, the National Grid in England or Great Britain. And the one down here, this is actually the grid, the owner of the electrical grid in Spain. And then this one might be Italy. You get the point. I actually left those blank. I did not pursue coverage on them. I'm not so sure that wouldn't be like buying the TV manufacturers instead of the Corning. I mean, okay, this is the company. I have to be convinced that there is investment opportunity in just these. Now they're going to be pushed along with everything else. And you look at American Electric Power in the United States, for example, there's going to be growth there because of the electricity network. I just left them go for now. I may come back and dig a little bit deeper. Again, we were looking for the suppliers and
there's that Quanta you talked about earlier is on this list too. PWR pretty high on the list.
Yeah. So this is the kind of companies that are in this portfolio. You can see they actually look pretty good. And then here's the old what have you done for us lately? Again, I wanted to make the point that ABB is a powerhouse when it comes to this particular subject. And it's been in the portfolio since 2009. So again, it's been in there since 14 years, probably one of their original purchases in this First Trust ETF. And then the rest of them are companies that have been added to the portfolio within the last year or so. So again, those are the type of companies where we might want to scratch our heads and see if there's opportunity there. You know, everything from little fuse down there at the bottom to preformed line products. I happen to know that they do make industrial electrical stuff. National Instruments being on there. I'd never heard of Fluence Energy. I'd be interested, but notice these technology companies also creeping in there fairly recently. So just a place to nudge and urge ideas. I do not know yet what LS is. LS Electric, probably international. You'll find a lot of international stuff, but
Mark, you think the tech stocks are creeping in because they're the ones controlling the flow of power through the grid? And what? Because they're buying chips from them to do that, or the companies are actually acting as consultants? What do you think?
Well, some of it would be energy management. You could throw Honeywell into that mix. Honeywell or Johnson Controls.
Makes sense.
Those are there, but a lot, if you've been to a control room for any one of these power plants, just like we showed for the data center for Google a few weeks ago, a power plant has these control systems which are just full of racks of cards and computer chips, and it actually breaches into the AI discussion too, the smart grid. I mean, there's companies out there working on development projects for optimization type concepts, and many of them are, well, the ringleader right now is obviously NVIDIA in that area.
So whoever's controlling the grid is actually purchasing things right from these chip makers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So they're in the subcomponent range, but again, optimization is a pretty big deal for these type of companies. All right. One last mention. This is a company we brought up last week. I thought we would bring it back. This is graphene. And the intriguing part of graphene is that if you produce it and can make a battery with it, again, I do not know the strict engineering details behind this, at least not yet, but They're basically saying they can avoid lithium fires and that kind of stuff, and raise the range and all that kind of stuff with this graphene product. Now, the problem I have with this particular company, first of all, it's private. And I actually teased the audience last week with putting some money in this through one of the unicorn or private equity things, and that's what's shown on this next page. This Net Capital is one of the places where you can actually invest. I opened an account, didn't give them any of my money yet, but you can actually invest in these early stage companies. And up on the upper right, there's actually a link to a really nice slideshow that I want to go back and revisit. What I'm looking for here, tell me if you think I'm crazy, Ken, but I need to see some type of leverage, some advantage, either some intellectual capital or manufacturing process or something that makes these guys okay. Because Matt Spielman actually posted in our forum a 40-minute video. I watched the whole thing of a guy in his garage making graphene. And I would encourage you to watch it. Just, first of all, it's just fabulous when you think about the tens of thousands of this type of guy that are out there in garages. It's one of the things that makes America great when you watch that video. So it's a whole lot of fun. But again, I'm looking for, what do these guys have that makes them special, you know, and locks in some promise of opportunity. So that's all I really know about that right now. But it is fascinating when you see these type of companies kicked around.
Mark, could you go back a slide? I wonder if that's an attempt to show you what graphene looks like in a molecular state behind the car there. And it looks like just carbon rings that are just all attached to each other in flat, one molecule thick arrays. The question to me would be, how do you take and use them for something? You know, I almost think you'd have to laminate these to a place where they were thick enough for you to see. I mean, I'm not quite certain that one molecule thick is enough, and maybe you can give me some information and prove me wrong, but I'm thinking that these might have to be laminated to make
layers,
sense.
layered
up.
Yeah, I get that. Again, it's something that we need to understand, but the demonstrations that I saw, even with a lot of it has to do with the conductivity. It just goes off the chart when it forms into this graphene compared to a regular component of a battery. And the fact that it's 200 times stronger than steel, he actually demonstrates that during the video. It's just incredible.
It just boggles your mind the number of ways that the simple carbon atom can be recombined in all these different forms so that they look different and act different and give us properties that we never even imagine you could get out of a lump of charcoal. I guess we'll start there.
Well, it basically is just powdered charcoal that he starts the. I do notice the word patented here, so that's actually a feather in their cap. See what that actually means in terms of that kind of stuff. So again, this video it's actually a slide presentation. It's pretty good.
Matt is telling us that graphene is visible, but looks gray instead of black like graphite. So Matt, are you looking at a number of these layers when it's visible, when you can actually see it? I'm going to move Matt to the back room and give him it, or maybe I can just unmute him and ask him to answer that for us there. Let me get down to.
And I want to share Matt's conversation that we had privately about the promise of just thinking about guys doing this in their garage. Guys and gals.
Hey guys.
Hey Matt. Good afternoon, Matt. Are you looking at a number of different layers when you're actually seeing the graphene?
Supposedly not. So this is primarily from that video, and this guy does a lot of interesting things with a lot of interesting materials. So his YouTube channel has a whole lot. If you're looking in sort of materials technology, there are a lot of things to go down the rabbit hole. But he does talk about observing this in an electron microscope. And he said that it's the gray color well, first of all, graphene is a single layer. When you have multiple layers together, it becomes graphite, and it loses a lot of its characteristics because the layers can slide among each other. And it is that gray color, which, and I don't know how, but it is the gray color, which is a telltale sign that it is a single layer. And it looks, what he made was a series of flakes. So he actually just simply used a kitchen sieve to filter out what hadn't reacted. And then he could fairly easily sort out with a pair of tweezers graphene flakes from graphite, either flakes or chunks. And then what he did for his strength test is he simply mixed them in an epoxy rod to compare its strength as a pure material versus reinforced with the graphene.
So theoretically, then they can be as large as you want them to be, right?
Yeah, I mean, compare it to, well, in fact, it's funny because he clearly is a brilliant guy, and he's clearly steeped in this. He flippantly talked about diamond being the second strongest form of carbon.
Right.
Think about, if we think about diamond and where diamond works, not just for jewelry, but in industrial purposes, that's an amazing offhand remark. But you look at, for example, in the aerospace industry, with first with military planes, and then with the 787 and A380, where they have carbon fiber bodies, and the fact that they have to roll them in very large sheets, sheets as big as the airplane, as big around as the airplane or as long as the wing, and then they have to bake them. So carbon fiber is essentially plastic, but it's carbon reinforced plastic. They have to bake them in place, in position together. So I do think there's something to say, or there could be other uses for large pieces, but it seemed to have quite dramatic effects, even as something to just impregnate a material with.
So the key then will be in developing sheets large enough to actually have practical usage. Is that right?
Well, it could be. I mean, if you talk about it, I'm no expert. I've watched the video. we walked through. I was amazed. I mean, you don't make a bridge out of epoxy tubes, right? Epoxy is very strong in certain ways. It's not stiff. But I was amazed, if you imagine it as very small, kind of like the same role that you might have for reinforcing rods in a bridge, right? So concrete is the main thing, but the iron complements it, or the steel rods complement it. I view it as that, in terms of what he was looking at, was to put it in materials for its material strength. Right. When you think about what Mark was talking about in terms of a battery, or perhaps in terms of, let's say, a replacement for an I-beam, or something that would be used in aerospace structure or spacecraft structure, I think you're going to need more pure materials, larger materials. That's my guess. But maybe there's something between here and there, where a graphene impregnated steel, titanium, aluminum, whatever, gets you somewhere in between.
All right. So what I would invite our audience to do is try to come up with, what is the hook? What makes these guys special? And the second question I have for you, Matt, is there any truth to the rumor that you rearranged your garage and dining room so you could make videos like this guy? So my undergraduate degree is in electrical engineering, but I have a concentration in optics. So I have an affinity for those kind of big language, or when people talk about advanced math topics, different transforms and things. I'm comfortable with that, even though I'm far removed from any kind of practical experience for that. So I've long held a retirement fantasy of a laser lab, or a coherent optics lab.
Well, it looks to me, Mark, like one of the keys to the whole thing is making the graphene seems to be something you can do in the garage, but making it in large pieces and making it in quantities that are industrial size quantities seems to be the thing that they've patented here.
Yeah, and you know, how does a company like BASF or somebody like that that does this kind of stuff all the time, you know, what sets these guys apart? You know,
Well,
that's the question.
I happen to have a vice president of BASF in my investment club.
Okay, well, let's find
So
out.
I think I'm going to bring this question to him about graphene and see what he knows about it.
Good idea.
The other path down the rabbit hole that is referred to in the video I posted, he said that the research he counted on to sort of make his process was out of Rice University.
Yeah.
So there's not surprisingly a materials group there. And it was a graduate student's project who took what was, and I forget, I mean, graphene was a very expensive thing to make. He talked about some of the areas prior to this. It's almost like, you know, fusion in a bottle or cold fusion sort of things. It's an exotic material. It's very expensive in the realm of very large organizations. And this graduate student figured out a way to do it in a standard diameter glass laboratory tube, basically. And again, so this guy can do it in his garage. So he credited that student for a lot. And I'd say whatever that student is looking to do in the future, or that lab may build off of it, they may have a lot of public domain research going into that too.
All right, so we need to keep track of all that stuff. Thanks, Matt.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff. So again, here's our kind of our wrap-up slide, and this is I'm beginning to at least question in my own mind. As many of you know, we've selected Generac for the roundtable about a year ago. And shortly after that, we started hearing all these stories about the F-150s and basically providing powers to houses and all that kind of stuff. And then you basically blend that with some of the stuff that Tesla is talking about. And there's actually a specific mention by Musk of how they could actually support the grid on a house-by-house basis in the future. Again, we're talking about the chips and the AI and all that kind of stuff. Just think about this notion of replacing these mega batteries with a distributed battery that somehow solves, you know, a fairly major problem. And that's kind of what they're talking about. So for those people out there that think, and it's still true pretty much predominantly, that Tesla's an automotive company, but they're not just an automotive company, something we've been talking about around here for the last couple of years, and they are clearly attempting to leverage across this entire spectrum. And yeah, they certainly deserve a place in the portfolio to keep track of what they're doing. So good stuff. Good keynote there. All right, so we're going to go ahead and wrap up because Ken and I have to get on the road. Here's a reminder that we will be posting all of these sessions. We welcome your comments and suggestions, especially if you have any graphene discoveries that are not sugar-coated and that kind of stuff. So bring them out for us. And this is right up your alley, Matt. Anybody identify that photo and where it was taken?
Are we looking on the moon, maybe? Is this the lander over here that I'm seeing?
The moon, you're getting warm, but you're still out.
Is this Mars?
It's Mars.
Okay.
I mean, that is a pretty cool picture from the surface of Mars. All right, so any questions in the hopper, Ken? This is our mission in life.
No, we've kept up to date pretty well. So I'd like to know if anybody in the audience comes up with some material about this Avadain company. I think Mark and I would both like to hear information about Avadain. If you come across anything at all, shoot it our way or post it in the Manifest forum or whatever, you know, come to the next bull session and tell us about it, whatever you find.
And we'll publish next week the results of our long journey between here and our destination today.
All right.
All right, thanks everybody.
Good afternoon, everybody.